Your Creative Push, episode 130.
I think you just can't be afraid. You have to pursue the thing that is authentic to you and the art that is honest, because when you do that, people respond to it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Stephanie Law. Stephanie is a watercolor painter whose work is an exploration of mythology mixed with her personal symbolism. Her art journeys through surreal otherworlds, populated by dreamlike figures, masked creatures, and winged shadows. And Stephanie, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I was wondering if you could explain where your vision for these surreal otherworlds comes from.
Sure. They are, I guess, sort of my interpretation of an alternate reality that kind of overlays or underlays everything that you see around you, all the patterns and rhythms, beauty in the world, these little things that aren't really highlighted or perceived all the time. And I like to just kind of bring those to the forefront.
I love it. And has your mind kind of always been there? Like, has that always been a part of you, or is that something that kind of came later in life?
No, it's always been there. I've always been fascinated by fantastical imagery, mythology, and folklore. All these things have really kind of like deeply entrenched in my art and just in my inspiration. And so it's always been an aspect.
Now, one of my favorite things to talk about on this show is, when an artist or when a creative person dabbles in, multiple creative fields and tries to kind of blend the two things together. And I know that you're a dancer, so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how you try to merge the two.
Oh yeah, I've been dancing for about 20 years. I started with flamenco dancing. It's something that I never really imagined for myself. Like when I was young, I thought that I hated dance because I had some bad experiences with ballet early on. Oh. And so it wasn't until a friend asked me one day, she's like, "You want to come to a flamenco class?" And I said, "I don't even know what flamenco is, but sure, I'll go with you." And I just fell in love with it because it's this amazingly beautiful dance form. A lot of it is improvisational. It's about rhythms and flow, and there's contrast to it. And I fell in love. And so I started doing that. And ever since then, dance has been sort of very central in my life as well. And I feel like it works its way into my art in my focus on rhythm and flow and movement in a piece. Mm-hmm. Art and dance are just very opposite, right? Because one of them is the human body and it's in the moment, and each performance is its own piece of art. Whereas visual art is you do it by yourself, solitary, without an audience in front of you.
Right.
And then the presentation of the work is sort of an after fact to the actual creation of the work. So they're very opposite in this way, but I feel like the movement and rhythm that I feel in my body when I'm dancing, I try to kind of pull that out into the work of art as I'm creating visual art. And I can even feel the movement of the various components, not just human figures, but whenever I have any sort of compositional element, just the movement of tree branches, of just one element to the other, how your eye moves around the page, that kind of movement is what I'm talking about. And I feel like that is really important to my art and just how it engages the viewer.
I would definitely agree. I think it's definitely apparent with your work, and I think that's like a really inspirational thing too for people that have other interests, that have other ways that they like to express themselves. That you can merge the two. You can try to incorporate it into, and that makes you all that more unique. Well,
it also gives me a break sometimes from when I'm feeling really stuck with the art and just. I need to do something creative, but the visual painting aspect of it maybe is frustrating me at the moment. And having some other creative outlet is really beneficial at that point because I can have a shift in my brain and do something else that still activates that desire to create and do something, but is not really bashing my head against the wall with something that's frustrating me.
Right. Yeah, and I think that can happen a lot of times with writer's block or creative block.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good to shake it up, and it's good to have another outlet.
Yeah, multiple creative outlets are awesome.
For sure. Stephanie, you've worked for many different like projects and companies like Wizards of the Coast for the game Magic the Gathering, which is pretty interesting because I never got into that game. But when I used to play poker, a lot of my friends.
I'll tell you a secret, I never played
did.
it either.
Really? Yeah. But so I've seen the cards and stuff like that, and it's beautiful artwork and stuff like that. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference between working for someone else, working for a company like that, and then trying to fit into their vision versus doing your own personal work, kind of completely your own, with your own freedom and imagination and creation.
Yeah, a lot of my contract commission work was from earlier on in my career when I first got started, because initially when I thought about art as a career and I looked at what I was doing, which was fantasy art, the options available, really, what I saw was game art. Magic the Gathering was on the rise at that point and getting to be really popular, and still is right now. And game art for role-playing games, book covers, magazines. And these were the visible options as a fantasy artist. And so that was what I set my sights upon. That was what I wanted to do. And so I started down that path early on, started working for game companies. Magic Gathering was one of those, Wizards of the Coast, and I started doing this stuff. At first, it was really exciting because I'd gone from just getting started to suddenly seeing my work in publication, and that was really thrilling and very satisfying as well. But after a while, I started to realize that the vision for a lot of these games was not really the vision that I wanted to pursue for my own art. It wasn't really the type of art that was exciting me. Some of them were, and after a while, it became apparent that my art was kind of different from standard fantasy gaming artists. And a few of the art directors noticed this also, and they would come to me specifically because my style was a little bit different, and they were looking for that look. So they would come to me for that, which was really awesome because then it was more in line with what I wanted to do. But over the years, I started to realize that I was straying further and further from this, and that I really wanted to focus on my own ideas, which were the things that were really inspiring to me, and less on other people's. And so I started to make that shift gradually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it's nice then when the art director can, come to you, or art directors, I should say, come to you with your specific style. And then did that kind of encourage you to go and do your own thing then?
Yeah, it did. It's awesome when an art director understands the artist that they're working enough with, that they can pick out the things that appeal to that artist and that play to that artist's strengths. And I think that's the mark of a good art director, actually. And like I said, early on, it was exciting because it's like, oh, I'm seeing my art in print for the first time. And there is that aspect of it, and this image that I had of what success should look like as an artist. And I didn't realize that there were a whole other array of options that were being opened up to artists, because this was, I guess, when I started doing that was the late 90s. So the internet was really just getting started as a marketplace, and it was not really evident yet at that point how much this would change for artists. It was, I was a software engineer initially. And so it was pretty obvious what it was doing for software because all the .coms were going crazy at the time.
Right.
And I had no idea that I was sitting on this advantage that I had as a software engineer in this space, in this time when the internet was really starting to get going, and there were a lot of differing opportunities and career paths for artists being opened up now because we could directly communicate with our audience in a way that you couldn't ever do before. Before, you had to go through a middle person, basically, whether it was an agent or a publishing company or whatever. And now with the internet, suddenly you could actually reach out and touch and talk to your audience directly instead. And this was an amazing shift. It wasn't really evident initially, but it was, slowly gathering force. And of course now it really enables a lot of independent artists to really go about their own path this way.
Yeah, it's a massive help for creative people, not only to gain inspiration and connect with people that inspire you, but to also be able to inspire others.
Yeah, to really have a community also. That's
No, for
another thing that
sure.
you miss. Like you don't have that before because you're just kind of solitary. You're working in your own space unless you were an artist that was working within a company. But if you were freelancing, you're pretty much on your own all the time.
Right, right.
So having people to bounce ideas off and bounce inspiration and really just see what everyone else is doing has been amazing as well.
And to be able to find somebody that inspires you and then email them and ask them to come on your podcast too.
Exactly.
Well, let's go back even further before you started that. Can you take us back to one of your first creative moments and tell us that story?
Oh, my first creative moments. Let's see. I mean, I was always doing art. I was doing it every spare moment I could growing up. I was always drawing. I was never really bored because you just give me a pencil and paper and I was happy. Mm-hmm. But I guess like the first moment career wise, and when I made a really conscious choice, because I always wanted to be an artist. You asked me as a 5-year-old kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, an artist. I didn't really realize what that would entail or what it meant or how much hard work it was.
Right.
As I grew older, though, it kind of got pounded out of me as a viable career option, because everyone was saying, no, you never will be able to make a living like that. So you should just keep it on the side. Don't really think of that as a career option. Be something practical. So, which is why I went for computer science. Mm-hmm. My final year, when I was about to graduate from college, I was going to career fairs and talking with a lot of companies, and it was great. I got a lot of positive feedback, and people were excited, and I had a lot of career opportunities going that direction. And I came back from it, and I just started crying. I was really depressed, and I didn't even understand why, because it was this strange thing where I should have been happy because there was all this opportunity that was opening up, and I was about to, get a good job with one of these software startup companies, and I was just depressed and sad, and it took me about half an hour to really come to terms and realize that going to this career fair and really talking to these people and really starting to, set this as my career path was sort of me closing the door to art completely as a viable career option, or as the center of my life, my focus, right? Mm-hmm. And it was going to be relegated to the sidelines officially from this point on. and when I realized that this is why I was so unhappy, I was like, I can't do that. Then I need to, because this is important enough to me. This is something that moves me enough, motivates me enough that I need to make it a central part of my life. And so over the next few days, I sort of formulated various options that I could do going forward, like how I was going to address this problem now that I had. Because I realized that art needed to be a central part of my life, and I could not do it just on the side. And so I had a few options. One of them was like going to an art school specifically, which was going to be really expensive. Or another alternative was taking some kind of compromise job, which was maybe as a 3D game artist designer, because a lot of these companies were needing someone that had some sort of technical software knowledge as well, right? And so there were some compromise options that were open to me that were midway, but it wasn't what was going to make me happy. Also, I realized that compromise was, I wanted all or nothing, right? Or I want all.
Right.
So the third option really was, I was at this stage right now where I was ready to, head out into the workplace. And so I decided to take one of these software jobs with the full intention of giving myself a deadline or when I was going to switch over, because it wasn't going to be just, a couple of years of doing this and kind of hanging out. No, it was going to be a couple of years where my head's down. I'm going to be somehow formulating a direct plan of action to make art my career. So that's what I did. And I set myself a deadline initially of 2 years. It ended up taking 3 years, where I was working pretty hard. Full-time, 2 jobs is what it ended up being, because I was doing this software startup, and also at night I was just painting all the time. I was just drawing and painting and pursuing, sending my portfolio out to directors. And also somehow I was doing a lot of dancing at this time too. I don't know how I fit it all
Damn.
in. Yeah, at this point, I look back and I think like, oh my God, how was I doing it all? But yeah, somehow that all fit in there. And like I said, like the internet was this opening marketplace for an artist. Avenues that I didn't really even know existed or hadn't even planned for existing suddenly were opened up to me when I was doing this. And I started selling my work on my website and finding alternate avenues of selling my work and making it as an artist. And I wouldn't have even known this if I hadn't tried. And one thing I tell a lot of people sometimes that are trying to start off as an artist right now is like, you may have your imagined career path, what you think you want to be, what you want to do. Because you see artists around you and you see what they're doing. That might be what you think you want. But once you start doing it, be open to all the paths that are branching out around you, because there's a lot more to the world than you initially see. And once and a lot of the stuff you can't even experience or know about until you are, hip deep in it and experiencing everything and seeing these opportunities. And so just be open to all of that. My brother is currently kind of on that track because he's switching over from a sales job into trying to make art his central focus, because he also denied it early on and now is realizing that he needs to have it.
Right. And well, I love your story, and I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of, coming back from that job fair, like you're saying. And then, but for you were able to, realize that pretty immediately. I think a lot of people either don't realize it later, or they kind of push that down when they.
Well, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to deny the practical, sensible choice. Like, what you think is that, and to just, you can say, well, I can just do it on the side and I'll be happy with that. But when I was confronted with that, I realized I was not going to be happy with that.
Right. Yeah, I feel like you are kind of herded as a human being.
Yeah.
Like in with society that, you are like, all right, get a stable job that, you can do, and it's boring. And then as soon as you kind of stray from that herd, it seems like it's a common thread in a lot of people that I've talked to, a lot of artists, that, you when you stray from that herd, it's almost like everybody around you is pushing you back towards that path. Like, no, don't do art. You can't make money that way. Go back to that. So what would your advice be for somebody that wants to stray and it's kind of doing the thing that you're doing? Perhaps they are smack dab in a non-creative field, and they're trying to spend all their free time doing art or dancing or doing whatever. Do you have advice for them for trying to kind of balance that whole act?
The balancing it's tough. I mean, I won't lie about that. And it was really intense during those transition years, trying to really juggle it all. But I guess if you realize that it's what you need to do and it's your passion, and you look at what you're doing and are you happy doing that? Then you have to make a change. You have to do it. You have to just find the time and the moments to fit it in and to try to formulate a path. I mean, I think that's also an important part. You can't just kind of let it sort of happen. You have to be conscious about it. You have to make a conscious decision and make a plan of action, steps that you're going to do in order to go from point A to point B. And even if they're little steps, just take small steps, a little bit at a time, and you can get there. But if you just kind of look at it like, I want to be at point, Z right now, it's just going to be overwhelming. And you have to just take it, a little bit at a time, do a little bit of your art, whatever it is, a little bit of it each day, and sort of make your way towards that. But there has to be a conscious plan of action. You can't just be loosey-goosey about it.
Yeah, it's like you said, you had the plan of 2 years, and it took you 3 years. But
even then, it was really hard because I probably could have done it in 2 years. I was at a good enough place at that point, but software was it was a good place for that as well. This was at the height of the .com stuff. And so it was tough to leave that behind. It was a really hard decision because I was thinking, if I leave this, can I go back to it if I have to? I actually put it off by another year. So it was 3 years for me instead, even though I could have done it in two. Like I said, this is why it's important. You have to really set conscious goals for it, because otherwise it's just so easy to just fall into something and just let it keep going or deny what you really want or really need.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest advantages of SMART goals is having a timeline, of actually having an endpoint, as opposed to this like overall goal of I want to be an artist.
Yeah, that's what the 5-year-old me wanted.
Right. But yeah, to have something that you can actually attain and you can actually see the progress that you're making towards it is really, really important.
I think that applies even also just for the actual craft. I mean, improving yourself as an artist, that was one of the things that I started doing at that point also, was that I set small goals of improvement for my art for each painting. It wasn't like I'm going to be here. I'm going to be making this masterpiece immediately. I wanted to improve certain elements. Like I needed to work on anatomy. I needed to work on color contrast. I needed to work on just, the way that tree looked in that last picture. I want to improve it in the next one. So these minor, tiny little steps that I could take in each one and see visible progress as well to improve as an artist.
It's perfect advice. Well, are there any things now that you're on the right path?
Yeah.
Any things that hold you back kind of on a daily basis from, getting the creative work done?
Yeah. So about 7 years ago, I had a child, and it has been at the same time, the hardest and the best thing for my art in a way. And the funny thing is, I've heard a lot of other parent artists say the same thing. It's very difficult in a lot of ways, and time management. It really made me take a close look at my priorities again. My origin, as having this other job before where I switched over to art, it's made me always look on any art that I do with this frame of mind where I look at any project I take on and I say, do I really want to do that? Is this something that I feel passionate about? Because if I don't, I might as well have been a software engineer and just done this on the side. Because if I'm doing art that I don't fully feel passion for, then it's not something I should be doing. Right. And it's this frame of mind that I always question, each time I do a project, this is what I look at. Right. But it's still really easy to fall off and to really become susceptible to what you think you want, what everyone around you is telling you should be doing, this path to artistic success now that you're along this path, right? There's other pitfalls. There's ways where you can find yourself doing artwork that is not true to what you want to be communicating or doing and meaningful to you, right? And if you keep doing this, if you keep doing enough of that, eventually you find yourself on this path fairly firmly and looking around and being terrified to deviate from it because you're afraid you're going to lose your audience or lose your clients because you no longer want to do that work.
Right.
It's tricky to constantly be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and making sure that it is the art that is honest and authentic and something that speaks to you. And this is something that it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget even when you're constantly questioning it and making sure that you're trying to stay on this path. And having a child in the picture in limited time suddenly made me really honestly answer these questions and to look back on, all the art I was creating and really whittle it down to the things that were important to me, the art that was important to me, the things that I really truly wanted to be creating, because my time was so much more limited now. So I couldn't be wasting it on doing things that I was, half feeling. So yeah, that was an eye-opening thing for me. And it led to basically the past 3 years specifically, but the last 7 years being my best work, really the best artwork that I've created over my entire career. It's work that I really feel for, and it's work that I really am passionate about. And so it's interesting what this has forced me to confront myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people could relate to that. And what would you say is the best way to, I guess, like navigate that? Because I think it's such a good point that, you know, you start doing a certain style or you start doing a certain type of work, but you in your heart want to either deviate from it or try something out that's new, but you are worried about what other people will think, what your audience will think, and what it will do for, you know, your art career, I guess. How do you navigate that?
I think you just can't be afraid. You have to go for it. You have to pursue the thing that is authentic to you and the art that is honest, because when you do that, people respond to it. And you'll respond to it much more so than if you do something that you think other people want, because then you're not being honest, and then you're not creating your best work. You're not challenging yourself, and you're just kind of doing, you're listening to an inner art director that is leading you astray.
Right. The inner art director. Damn it. Yeah, it's very interesting. And it's almost like you have to kind of take everything in, you know, obviously like listen to what other people, you know, how they perceive your work. But then when you're like, in the process of doing the art, of doing the creative thing, it's almost like you just have to like kind of clear everything out of your head and just only like listen to your heart. You know, it's like taking all that stuff in and then just kind of going by, you know, your heart almost.
I mean, art, like I said in the beginning when we were talking about dance and art, it's a thing that you do by yourself. It's when you sit down in front of the paper, the pencil or paintbrush or whatever, and it's just you and that. And you have to listen to what your own integrity is saying that you need to paint and create. And if you don't, then people see that and they respond less to it. So if you paint what is honest to yourself, again, they will respond to that as well.
Absolutely. Stephanie, this has been incredible, but it is time for the final push. This is where I ask you to reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best advice and push them to pursue their creative passions.
Yeah. So I guess if you are passionate about your art, then you need to find ways to make it a priority in your life. And I know we don't always have time. It's an easy thing to say to yourself, you know, I don't have time for it. I've got so much other stuff I need to do. I want to, but I can't. And this doesn't mean that you have to dedicate yourself to the pursuit of it 24/7, but you need to take steps to make art a daily part of your life, even if it's just a small and tiny piece. I mean, for me, in the early days when I was starting to work, you know, my startup job at a company and pursue my craft, sometimes it just came down to really carrying a mini sketchbook in my purse. And then when I was waiting to meet up with someone or hanging out at a bus stop, I would just do a little doodle. And that's all it takes sometimes to remind yourself that the art is important and that the creative energy needs to be an aspect of your daily existence. And from these little acts of creativity, larger inspiration follows. When you decide to let go of the concept that time is precious and that it has to be used only to make masterpieces, then you're freed up to take chances and risks. And that's where inspiration comes from.
I love it. Yeah, it's making it that daily practice. And you're right, you know, allowing yourself that kind of freedom is just totally liberating. And you, like you were talking about earlier in the interview too, you never know, you know, where it will take you.
Yeah. You just have to be open to it, be open to the opportunities that come to you.
I love it. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And you can find Stephanie on her website, which is shadowscapes.com. You can find her on Facebook and Twitter at Shadowscapes, and on Instagram, she is SPM Law, SPMLAW. And you can find everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/Stephanie Law. Stephanie, thank you again.
All right.
A huge thank you to Stephanie for coming on the show. This is kind of what the show's all about. It's about finding these people that were able to make this transition. And for Stephanie, she was able to figure it out right away, like instantly, that she was about to walk down a path that wouldn't make her happy in the long run, going down the path that was not art. She just knew it in her gut. And I think a lot of us do know in our guts that we are doing something that isn't quite what we were born for. We're not able to express ourselves in quite the way that we were designed to. And some of us don't figure that out until much, much later when we're already deep down into that path. But that's okay. Like Stephanie did, though, it's really important to set SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable or achievable, realistic, and time-based or, trackable. And that T in SMART is the most important, I think, is that you set a time for you to figure out and to track this new goal that you have. And when you do that, it's not this overall goal, like we were saying, of, I want to be an artist, or I want to not do my job anymore and do something creative. And that's where the specific comes in as well. But making a solid plan of, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, to get to the place that you want to be. Maybe it's not changing your career. Maybe it's just progressing as an artist, progressing as a creative person, or achieving a body of work, 10 big paintings, a novel, your first album, whatever it is that is your thing. You already kind of know what it is probably in your head as I'm talking. You have to set a timeline for that. And to do that, you can also chunk it down and make shorter attainable goals so that you can see your progress and track it, like we were talking about. But it's so important, and it really puts you in the driver's seat, and it makes you on a path as opposed to on a just general fleeting desire to, have this be a hobby that you spend all of your free time doing. You're going towards something, and it will really help to bring you back to the easel, or back to the sketchbook, or back to the computer, or back to whatever it is that is your tool for getting there every single day. It will keep you driven to get to that goal that you have set for a certain time. And I really thank Stephanie for sharing her story and showing us that it can be done. You just have to be driven to do it. But that is all I have got for you today. Hopefully you are inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. And we will be here for you on Friday if you need the push again. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, thank you so much for letting us be a part of your day and helping to motivate you to do the thing that you are meant to do. I love you all, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.